Sarah Johnson stood at her kitchen counter, holding the official-looking letter with shaking hands. The morning sun came through the window, but she felt cold inside. The letter had arrived with the regular mail, mixed in with bills and advertisements. At first glance, it looked like any other business letter. But when she read it, her heart started beating fast. The letter was from something called the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. Sarah had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. She had never heard of any homeowners association. When she and her husband Mike bought their house, they picked this area specifically because it did not have an HOA. They wanted freedom to do what they wanted with their own property. The letter demanded $2,500. It said this was for accumulated violations. According to the letter, their lawn was not up to standards. It also said their house paint color was not approved. Sarah looked out at their front yard. The grass was green and well kept. Mike mowed it every Saturday morning. Their house was painted a nice light blue color. It looked just like many other houses on their street. Sarah read the letter again. It had fancy letterhead at the top with an official-looking logo. The language sounded legal and serious. It mentioned code violations and enforcement actions. At the bottom was a signature from someone called David Richardson, HOA Enforcement Director. There was also a phone number and an address for mailing payments, but something felt wrong about the whole thing. Sarah had a good memory. When they bought their house, their real estate agent had made a big point about the neighborhood being HOA-free. That was one of the reasons they chose it. They had specifically looked for areas without homeowner associations because they did not want anyone telling them what they could do with their own property. Mike came into the kitchen carrying his coffee cup. He worked from home as a computer programmer, so he usually started his day later than Sarah. She worked at the local bank and had to leave soon for her shift. "What's that?" Mike asked, seeing the worried look on his wife's face. Sarah handed him the letter without saying anything. Mike read it slowly, his eyebrows getting higher as he went through each paragraph. When he finished, he looked up at Sarah with confusion. "This doesn't make any sense," he said. "We don't have an HOA. We never had an HOA. Remember when we bought the house? Jennifer made sure to tell us about that." Jennifer was their real estate agent. She had been very thorough about explaining all the details of their neighborhood. She had even given them copies of all the neighborhood covenants and restrictions. There had been no mention of any homeowners association. "That's exactly what I was thinking," Sarah said. "But look how official it looks. And they know our address and everything." Mike studied the letter more carefully. The letterhead did look professional. It had what appeared to be an official seal. The language was full of legal terms that sounded real, but the more he read, the more suspicious he became. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a paragraph. "They're saying our paint color violates Section 4.2 of the community standards." "But what community standards? We never got any community standards when we moved in." Sarah nodded. "And look at this part about the lawn. They say the grass height exceeds the maximum allowed length. But Mike, you just mowed 3 days ago. The grass is maybe 2 inches tall." Their 16-year-old son Jake came downstairs. He was getting ready for school, carrying his backpack and looking for his car keys. Jake was a quiet kid who kept mostly to himself. He got good grades and stayed out of trouble. His main interests were history and military equipment. He spent a lot of time reading about different wars and studying military tactics. "Morning," Jake said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Jake, come look at this," Sarah said. "Did you ever hear anything about our neighborhood having a homeowners association?" Jake walked over and read the letter over his father's shoulder. He was tall for his age and had started growing a thin mustache that made him look older. As he read, his expression became serious. "No," he said slowly. "I've never heard anything about that. And I know most of the neighbors. Mrs. Patterson next door never mentioned anything like that. Neither did Mr. Chen across the street." Mike folded the letter and set it on the counter. "This has got to be some kind of scam. People try all sorts of tricks these days to get money from homeowners." But Sarah was not completely convinced. "What if we're wrong? What if there really is an HOA and we just didn't know about it? What if we really do owe this money?" "Then we'll find out," Mike said. "But I'm not paying $2,500 based on one letter from people I've never heard of." Jake picked up the letter and read it one more time. He had always been good at noticing details that other people missed. Something about the letter bothered him, but he could not put his finger on exactly what it was. "Dad," he said, "can I take a picture of this with my phone? I want to look up this company online when I get home from school." "Sure," Mike said. "Good thinking. Jake took several photos of both sides of the letter, making sure to get clear shots of the letterhead and the signature. He had learned to be thorough from his military history studies. Details mattered when you were trying to figure out what was really happening. Sarah looked at the clock on the stove. "I have to get to work." "But Mike, can you call this number today? I want to know what this is about." "Absolutely," Mike said. "I'll call them and ask for proof that this HOA actually exists. If they can't provide that, then we know it's fake." After Sarah left for work and Jake left for school, Mike sat at his kitchen table staring at the letter. He had dealt with scammers before. Usually they tried to get your credit card information over the phone, or trick you into giving them your social security number. But this was different. This felt more organized and sophisticated. The address on the letter was local. The phone number had the right area code. Whoever had sent this knew their names and address correctly. They even knew details about their property. That took planning and research. Mike decided to do some investigation before calling the number. He got his laptop and started searching online for Maple Grove Homeowners Association. Nothing came up. He tried different combinations of search terms. Still nothing. Then he searched for the name David Richardson along with HOA and enforcement. Again, no results. This was definitely suspicious. If there was a real homeowners association in their area, there would be some trace of it online. There would be a website or meeting minutes or at least some mention in local government records. Mike felt both relieved and worried at the same time. Relieved because he was now sure this was a scam. Worried because someone was targeting his family specifically. This was not a random mass mailing. Someone had taken the time to research their property and create a convincing fake letter just for them. The question was what they would do next. The phone call came at 7 in the morning on Thursday. Sarah was getting ready for work when the house phone rang. She almost did not answer it because most people called their cell phones these days, but something made her pick it up. "Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was stern and professional. "This is David Richardson from the Maple Grove Homeowners Association. We sent you a notice about outstanding violations on your property." Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had hoped the letter was just a one-time scam attempt. Now they were calling directly. "I got your letter," she said carefully, "but I think there's been a mistake. Our neighborhood doesn't have a homeowners association." "Mrs. Johnson, I understand your confusion, but you are incorrect. The HOA was established 18 months ago through proper legal channels. All residents were notified by mail." "We never got any notification," Sarah said, her voice getting stronger, "and we've lived here for 3 years. There was no HOA when we bought our house." The man's voice became colder. "Mrs. Johnson, ignorance of the association rules is not an excuse. Your violations have been documented with photographs. The paint on your house exterior is not from our approved color palette. Your lawn exceeds the maximum grass height on multiple occasions, and your driveway has oil stains that create an unsightly appearance." Sarah looked out her front window. Their driveway was clean. Mike had pressure washed it just 2 weeks ago. There were no oil stains anywhere. "Sir, I think you have the wrong house," she said. "Our property doesn't match that description at all." "I'm looking at photographs taken last Tuesday, Mrs. Johnson. The evidence is clear. Now we can resolve this matter simply if you pay the assessment today. The amount is $2,500, plus a $50 late fee since you haven't responded within the required time frame. I'm not paying anything until you prove this association actually exists," Sarah said, surprising herself with how firm she sounded. There was a long pause. When the man spoke again, his tone was threatening. "Mrs. Johnson, I suggest you reconsider your position. The association has legal authority to place liens on non-compliant properties. We can also initiate foreclosure proceedings if necessary. I'm sure you don't want to lose your home over such a small amount." The line went dead. Sarah stood holding the phone, her hands shaking. The caller had sounded so official, so confident. For a moment, she wondered if they really had missed some kind of notification about an HOA being formed. When Mike came downstairs, she told him about the call. His reaction was immediate anger. "They're trying to scare you," he said. "That's how these scams work. They use official language and legal threats to make people panic and pay up." But over the next few days, more calls came. Sometimes they came during the day when Mike was working from home. Sometimes they came in the evening when the family was having dinner. Once they called at 11 at night, waking everyone up. Each call was from someone claiming to be with the Maple Grove HOA. Sometimes it was David Richardson. Other times it was people with different names. Linda Martinez from the compliance department, or Robert Kim from legal services. They all had the same message: pay the money or face serious consequences. The threats got more specific. They mentioned that the Johnson family left for work and school at the same times every day. They knew that Sarah worked at First National Bank on Oak Street. They knew that Mike worked from home as a computer programmer. They even knew that Jake was on the school's debate team and stayed after school on Wednesdays for practice. Jake started paying attention to the phone calls. His parents tried to shield him from the stress, but he could hear the conversations anyway. Their house was not that big, and the callers were getting louder and more aggressive. What bothered Jake the most was how much the scammers knew about their family. He started a notebook where he wrote down everything the callers mentioned. They knew about his mother's work schedule. They knew his father worked from home. They knew about his school activities. Someone was watching them closely. On the following Monday, another letter arrived. This one was even more official looking than the first. It was sent by certified mail, which meant someone had to sign for it. The envelope had legal notice stamped in red letters across the front. Inside was a document that looked like a court filing. It claimed that the Johnson family was now subject to legal action for non-payment of HOA fees. It demanded payment of $3,000, the original $2,500 plus additional fines and legal costs. The document was full of legal language that was hard to understand. It mentioned court dates and judgments and property seizures. At the bottom was a warning that if they did not respond within 10 days, a default judgment would be entered against them. Sarah took the document to work and showed it to her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, who had been in banking for 20 years. Mrs. Chen looked it over carefully. "This looks fake to me," she said. "Real legal documents have case numbers and court seals. This has neither. Also, the formatting is wrong. I've seen plenty of real court papers and they don't look like this." But even knowing it was probably fake, Sarah could not shake her worry. What if they were wrong? What if this was all real and they were making a terrible mistake by not paying? The phone calls continued every day, sometimes multiple times per day. The callers always seemed to know exactly when someone was home. They never called when the house was empty. This convinced Jake that someone was definitely watching their house. He started paying attention to cars that drove by slowly or parked on their street for long periods. He noticed a white van that appeared several times during the week. It would park at the end of their block and stay for an hour or two, then leave. The windows were tinted so he could not see who was inside. Jake also started researching HOA scams online. He found dozens of similar stories from families across the country. The pattern was always the same: official-looking letters demanding money for fake violations, phone calls with legal threats, escalating pressure until victims either paid or the scammers moved on to easier targets. But Jake also found stories where the scams had gone further. Some victims reported vandalism to their property. Others had strangers showing up at their doors claiming to be HOA representatives. A few families had even been burglarized after refusing to pay. This information made Jake nervous. He did not want to worry his parents more than they already were, but he felt like his family needed to be prepared for whatever might come next. On Thursday evening, while his parents were watching television, Jake went to his bedroom and pulled out a box from under his bed. Inside were books about military tactics and personal security. He had been interested in this subject for years, but now it felt more important than just a hobby. He also had some equipment he had purchased with money from his part-time job at the local hardware store. Nothing dramatic, just some basic security items like motion sensor lights and door reinforcement hardware. He had been planning to suggest these improvements to his parents for months, but had not found the right time to bring it up. Now seemed like the right time. The next morning, Jake approached his father while his mother was getting ready for work. "Dad, I think we should make our house more secure," he said. "These people know too much about us. They're watching our house and probably planning something." Mike looked at his son seriously. Jake was usually quiet and kept his opinions to himself. When he spoke up about something, it was worth listening to. "What do you have in mind?" Mike asked. Jake showed him the motion sensor lights and explained how they could install them around the property. He also had researched security cameras and door reinforcements. Nothing expensive or complicated, just basic precautions. Mike realized his son had been thinking about this situation more seriously than he had given him credit for. Maybe it was time to take stronger measures to protect their family. Sarah decided she was not going to live in fear anymore. On Friday morning, instead of going straight to work, she drove to the county courthouse. If there really was a homeowners association in their neighborhood, there would be legal records of it somewhere. The clerk at the property records office was helpful. Her name was Mrs. Rodriguez, and she had worked there for 15 years. She knew how to find information about HOAs and property covenants. "Let me look up your subdivision," Mrs. Rodriguez said, typing on her computer. "Maple Grove subdivision on Elmwood Drive, right?" "That's right," Sarah said. "Someone is claiming there's been an HOA established there, but we never heard about it." Mrs. Rodriguez frowned at her screen. "I'm not finding any records of a homeowners association being formed in that area. Let me check the covenant records, too." She typed some more, then shook her head. "No, there's nothing here. Your subdivision was platted 12 years ago with standard residential covenants, but no HOA was ever established." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that she had been right all along. Anger that someone was trying so hard to scam her family. "Can you print me something that shows there's no HOA?" she asked. "I want official proof." Mrs. Rodriguez printed out several documents. One showed the original subdivision plat with no mention of an HOA. Another was a search result showing no homeowners associations registered in their area. The third was a covenant document that specifically stated the subdivision would remain HOA-free. If someone is claiming to represent an HOA in your neighborhood, they're lying, Mrs. Rodriguez said. "You should report this to the police. This sounds like fraud to me." From the courthouse, Sarah drove to the police station. She was not sure if they would take her seriously, but she wanted to file a report anyway. Officer Martinez listened to her story and looked at the fake letters and documents. He was younger than Sarah had expected, but he seemed to know what he was talking about. "We've been seeing more of these HOA scams lately," he said. "Usually they start with letters and phone calls, but sometimes they escalate to more serious harassment." "Have you gotten any threats of physical harm?" "Not exactly," Sarah said. "But they keep calling, and they know things about our family that worry me. They know our schedules and where we work." Officer Martinez made notes in his report. "I'm going to give you a case number for this. Keep documenting everything, save all the letters, write down the dates and times of phone calls, and call us immediately if anyone shows up at your house claiming to represent this fake HOA." Meanwhile, Mike was doing his own investigation at home. He had taken the day off work to focus on this problem. Using his computer skills, he was trying to trace the phone number and address from the fake letters. The phone number turned out to be a disposable cell phone purchased with cash. There was no way to track who owned it. The address on the letterhead was real, but when Mike looked it up, it was just a mailbox service in a shopping center across town. Mike drove to the mailbox location to check it out. It was one of those places that rented private mailboxes to people who needed business addresses. The owner of the service, Mr. Park, was cooperative when Mike explained the situation. "Someone has been renting box 247 for about 2 months," Mr. Park said. "Paid cash for 6 months in advance. But I never actually met the person. They sent someone else to set up the account." "Can you describe the person who set it up?" Mike asked. It was a woman, maybe in her 30s, brown hair. She said she was setting up the box for her boss, who traveled a lot. Seemed normal enough at the time. Mr. Park agreed to call Mike if anyone came to check the mailbox. He also said he would not accept any more payments to keep the box active. While his parents were out investigating, Jake was conducting his own research. He had stayed home from school, claiming he felt sick. His parents were too distracted to question him closely about it. Jake had been thinking about the white van he kept seeing on their street. That morning, he had positioned himself at his bedroom window with a pair of binoculars his father used for bird watching. Sure enough, around 10 o'clock, the white van appeared and parked at the end of their block. Jake watched the van carefully. The windows were tinted, but he could see shadows of at least 2 people inside. They seemed to be watching his house. After about an hour, the van drove away slowly, but Jake had been ready for this. While watching through the binoculars, he had also been using his phone to take photos and record video. He managed to get a clear shot of the license plate and several photos of the van itself. Using his laptop, Jake researched how to look up license plate information. Most of the legitimate services required payment or official authorization, but he found some basic information through public databases. The van was registered to something called Metro Property Services, but when he looked up that business name, he could not find any real information about it. Jake also spent time that day setting up some of the security equipment he had been collecting. He installed motion sensor lights near the front and back doors. He also set up a small wireless camera in his bedroom window that had a view of the street. It was not professional equipment, but it would record anyone who came onto their property. When his parents came home that afternoon, they shared what they had learned. Sarah showed Mike the official documents proving no HOA existed in their neighborhood. Mike told them about the fake mailbox address and the untraceable phone number. Jake hesitated before sharing his information. He did not want his parents to know he had skipped school. But the license plate information seemed too important to keep secret. "I saw that white van again today," he said. "The one I told you about before. I got some photos of it, including the license plate." Mike looked at the photos on Jake's phone. "This is good work, son. How did you get such clear pictures?" "I was watching from my bedroom window," Jake said, not mentioning that he had been there all day instead of at school. Sarah looked at the photos too. Seeing actual evidence that someone was watching their house made the situation feel much more real and threatening. "We need to take this to the police," she said. "This is definitely stalking or harassment or something." That evening, the whole family went back to the police station. Officer Martinez was still on duty, and he was very interested in the new information they had gathered. "You've done excellent investigative work," he told them. "The license plate information is especially helpful. I can run this through our system and see what comes up." He also looked at Jake's photos of the van. "You can see there are at least 2 people inside. They're definitely conducting surveillance on your house. This has moved beyond simple fraud into stalking territory." Officer Martinez made copies of all their evidence and added it to their case file. "I want you to be very careful over the next few days," he said. "These people know your routines and they're getting bolder. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. And call 911 immediately if anyone approaches your house or tries to contact you in person." As they drove home, Jake felt both proud and nervous. Proud because his parents were treating him like an adult and taking his observations seriously. Nervous because he was starting to understand how serious this situation really was. "Dad," he said from the back seat, "I think we should be prepared for these people to try something more than just phone calls and letters." Mike looked at his son in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "I've been reading about similar scams online. Sometimes when people don't pay, the scammers try to break in or vandalize property to scare them. I think we should have a plan for what to do if someone comes to our house." Sarah turned around to look at Jake. "What kind of plan?" Jake had been thinking about this all day. Simple stuff. Like if strangers come to the door, we don't answer it and we call the police immediately. If we hear someone trying to break in, we all go to the same room and call 911. And maybe we should have some kind of protection just in case. Mike nodded slowly. "Those are smart precautions. I think you're right that we need to be prepared for this to get worse before it gets better." But none of them realized just how much worse it would get. Or how soon. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Mike was in the garage organizing tools while Sarah was grocery shopping. Jake was in his room doing homework. The sound of the doorbell made Jake look up from his desk. They were not expecting anyone. Jake went to his bedroom window and looked down at the front porch. 2 men in dark blue uniforms were standing at their front door. They had clipboards and official-looking badges hanging from their belts. A white van was parked in their driveway, the same van Jake had been photographing all week. Jake's heart started beating faster. These were not delivery men or repair workers. These were the people who had been harassing his family. The doorbell rang again, followed by loud knocking. Jake could hear one of the men calling out, "Hello? HOA enforcement. We need to speak with the property owner." Jake quickly grabbed his phone and called his father's cell phone. "Dad, don't come in the front door," he said quietly when Mike answered. "There are 2 guys at the front door claiming to be from the HOA. They're in that white van I've been seeing." Mike's voice became serious immediately. "I'm coming in through the back door. Don't answer the front door and call 911 right now." Jake called 911 while watching the men through his window. They were getting more aggressive, pounding harder on the door and shouting louder. "This is HOA enforcement. We have the authority to inspect this property. Open this door immediately." The 911 operator took Jake's information and promised to send officers right away. Jake could hear his father coming in through the kitchen door downstairs. The men at the front door seemed to realize no one was going to answer. Jake watched them walk around the side of the house toward the backyard. He called down to his father, "Dad, they're coming around to the back." Mike met the two men as they came around the corner of the house. He stayed near the back door, ready to go inside quickly if needed. "Can I help you?" Mike said in a calm but firm voice. The first man was tall and thin with a scraggly beard. He wore a uniform shirt with property enforcement embroidered on the chest. The second man was shorter but more muscular with tattoos visible on his arms. "Are you Michael Johnson?" the tall man asked. "Who wants to know?" Mike replied. The tall man held up a laminated ID card. "I'm Officer Stevens from the Maple Grove HOA Enforcement Division. This is Officer Rodriguez. We're here to conduct a mandatory inspection of your property." Mike stepped closer to look at the ID card, but not close enough for them to grab him. The card looked official, but so had all the fake letters they had been receiving. "I'm going to need to see some real identification," Mike said. "Driver's licenses and official credentials from a legitimate agency." The shorter man became aggressive immediately. "You don't have a choice here, buddy. We have the legal authority to inspect this property with or without your cooperation." "Actually, you don't," Mike said. "I've checked with the county records office. There is no HOA in this neighborhood. You're trespassing on my property and I want you to leave." The tall man tried to sound reasonable. "Mr. Johnson, I understand your confusion. Many homeowners are not aware of all the regulations that apply to their property. But ignorance of the law is not a defense. We're trying to help you resolve this situation before it requires legal action." "Show me a court order," Mike said. "Show me something from a real government agency that gives you the authority to be here." The two men looked at each other. Jake watched from his window as the shorter man reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a crowbar or pry bar. "Maybe we need to explain this in a way you'll understand better," the shorter man said, holding the tool where Mike could see it. That was when Jake heard police sirens in the distance. The two fake enforcement officers heard them too. Their whole attitude changed immediately. "This isn't over," the tall man said. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be." They started walking quickly back toward their van. Mike followed them, staying a safe distance behind to make sure they actually left. "Remember our phone number," the shorter man called back. "This is your last chance to handle this the easy way." They got in their van and drove away just as the police car turned onto the street. Officer Martinez was driving, along with another officer Jake did not recognize. Mike explained what had happened while Jake came outside to give his account of watching from the window. Officer Martinez took detailed notes and asked to see Jake's photos of the van again. "This is definitely criminal harassment now," Officer Martinez said. "Showing up at your house with weapons and making threats crosses several legal lines. I'm going to put extra patrol cars in this neighborhood for the next few days." The other officer, whose name tag said Johnson, no relation to their family, looked at the crowbar marks in the dirt where the shorter man had been standing. "They came prepared for trouble," Officer Johnson said. "This suggests they might be planning something more aggressive if you continue to refuse their demands." After the police left, Mike called Sarah to tell her what had happened. She was still at the grocery store, but she came home immediately. When she heard the story, she was both frightened and angry. "They can't just show up at our house and threaten us," she said. "This is America. We have rights." Jake had been quiet during the conversation with police, but now he spoke up. "Mom, I don't think they're going to stop," he said. "These aren't normal criminals. They're organized and they're persistent, and now they know we're not going to pay them, so they might try something worse." Sarah looked at her 16-year-old son. He seemed older than his age when he talked about this situation. His analysis of their problems had been accurate so far. "What do you think we should do?" she asked him. Jake had been thinking about this question all week. "I think we need to be prepared to defend ourselves," he said. "The police can't be here all the time. And these guys know our schedules. They know when we're home alone." Mike nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe it's time to look into some kind of home security system, and maybe some other precautions too." That evening, Mike went to the hardware store and bought new locks for all the doors. He also bought motion sensor floodlights and a baseball bat that he kept near the back door. Sarah researched home security companies and scheduled consultations with 3 different firms for the following week. Jake made his own preparations. He had been saving money from his part-time job for months. Originally, he had planned to buy a motorcycle when he turned 17, but now he had a different priority. On Sunday morning, while his parents were at church, Jake drove to a sporting goods store across town. He had done research about what he needed and what the legal requirements were. At 17, he was too young to purchase a handgun, but he could legally buy certain other types of firearms with parental permission. Jake had always been interested in military history and equipment. He had read extensively about different weapons and their capabilities. He also knew about gun safety and had even taken a marksmanship class the previous summer at a local shooting range. At the sporting goods store, Jake talked to the manager about his family's situation. The manager, an older man named Bill who was a retired police officer, understood immediately. "Sounds like your family needs some serious protection," Bill said. "Let me show you some options that would be legal for someone your age to own." Bill showed Jake several rifles and shotguns that would be appropriate for home defense. He explained the advantages and disadvantages of each type. He also talked about ammunition choices and basic tactics for defending a home. "The key is not to look for trouble," Bill explained. "But if trouble comes to you, you need to be ready to handle it effectively." Jake chose a semi-automatic rifle that was reliable and easy to handle. It was not the most powerful weapon in the store, but it was accurate and had enough stopping power to deter attackers. Bill also sold him ammunition, a cleaning kit, and a secure gun safe for storage. "You'll need your parents to sign the paperwork," Bill said, "and I strongly recommend you get some training before you ever need to use this thing." Jake nodded. "My dad and I are planning to go to the shooting range next weekend, and I've been reading about home defense tactics." When Jake got home, he told his parents what he had done. He explained his reasoning and showed them the information Bill had given him about home defense strategies. Mike and Sarah were surprised but not upset. They could see that Jake had thought this through carefully and responsibly. "I guess we're past the point where we can just ignore this problem," Sarah said. "If the police think these people might escalate to violence, then we need to be prepared." Mike agreed to go to the gun store with Jake the next day to sign the paperwork and meet Bill personally. He also wanted to schedule training sessions for the whole family. "I hope we never need to use any of this," Mike said. "But I'd rather have protection we don't need than need protection we don't have." None of them realized how soon they would need it. Monday morning brought another threatening phone call, but this time the tone was different. Instead of the fake official language they had been using before, the caller was openly angry. Sarah answered the phone while getting ready for work. The voice was the same one that had been calling for weeks, but now he sounded frustrated and mean. "You made a big mistake calling the cops, lady," the voice said. "This was supposed to be simple. Pay the money, problem goes away. But you had to make it complicated." "I don't know who this is, but you need to stop calling us," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Oh, I know exactly who you are, Sarah Johnson. I know you work at First National Bank on Oak Street. I know you drive a blue Honda Civic. I know your husband works from home on his computer. And I know your kid goes to Jefferson High School." Sarah felt cold fear wash over her. The caller was not just threatening her anymore. He was threatening her whole family. "If you contact us again, I'm calling the police," she said. The caller laughed. "Go ahead. Call the police. See how much good it does you. We know where you live, Sarah. We know your schedule. The police can't protect you 24 hours a day." The line went dead. Sarah stood in her bedroom holding the phone and shaking. This was no longer about money. This had become personal. When she told Mike about the call, he made an immediate decision. "I'm not going to work today," he said. "And you're not going either. We're staying together until we figure out how to handle this." Sarah called in sick to the bank. Mike sent emails to his clients explaining he had a family emergency and would not be available for the next few days. Jake decided not to go to school either, though he did not tell his parents he had been skipping school regularly for the past week. Instead of going to their regular jobs, the Johnson family spent Monday morning at the police station. Officer Martinez listened to their report about the threatening phone call and looked worried. "This situation is escalating quickly," he said. "When they start making direct threats against family members, that's usually a sign they're planning something more serious." Officer Martinez arranged for increased police patrols in their neighborhood. He also gave them his direct phone number and told them to call him immediately if anything else happened. "I want you to consider staying somewhere else for a few days," he suggested. "Maybe with relatives or friends until we can identify these people and arrest them." But Mike shook his head. If we leave our house, they might break in and steal everything we own. Or they might vandalize it so badly we can't live there anymore. I think we're safer staying and being prepared to defend ourselves. After leaving the police station, the family drove to Bill's sporting goods store. Mike wanted to meet the retired police officer Jake had talked to and get his advice about their situation. Bill listened to their story and nodded grimly. "I've seen this kind of thing before," he said. "When scammers get this aggressive, it usually means they've invested too much time and effort to just give up and move on to easier targets." Bill took them to a back room where he had set up a small classroom for firearms training. The walls were covered with charts showing different types of weapons and basic safety rules. "Let me explain some things about home defense," Bill said. "First, you never want to go looking for trouble. If someone breaks into your house, your goal is to protect your family, not to chase the bad guys around." Bill showed them diagrams of how to set up defensive positions inside a house. The key was to have a safe room where the family could gather and defend a single entrance, rather than trying to protect the whole house. "Pick one room that has only one door," Bill explained. "Put a strong lock on that door and reinforce it if necessary. Keep your phone charger in that room so you can call for help. And if you have a weapon, position yourself so you have a clear shot at anyone trying to come through that door." Mike and Sarah asked detailed questions about legal issues. They wanted to make sure they understood exactly what they could and could not do to defend their property and family. "In this state, you have the right to defend your home against intruders," Bill explained. "But you have to be reasonable about it. You can't shoot someone for just walking across your lawn. But if they break into your house, especially if they're armed or making threats, then you have the right to stop them with whatever force is necessary." Bill also emphasized the importance of training and practice. "Having a weapon you don't know how to use properly is almost worse than having no weapon at all," he said. They spent 2 hours at the gun store, learning basic safety rules and practicing with unloaded weapons. Bill showed them how to load and unload the rifle Jake had chosen, how to aim accurately, and how to clean and maintain the weapon properly. Mike signed the paperwork to purchase the rifle and ammunition. He also bought a tactical flashlight, extra locks for their doors, and a portable radio that would work even if their phone lines were cut. When they got home, they spent the afternoon preparing their house for possible trouble. They moved furniture to create better defensive positions. They installed the new locks and reinforced the frames around their doors. Mike also set up the motion sensor lights Jake had bought earlier. Jake surprised his parents with how much he already knew about home security. He had been reading about it for weeks and had even watched training videos online. "We should establish clear signals for different situations," Jake suggested. "Like if someone is trying to break in the front door, we all meet in the master bedroom because it has the best view of the street and only one entrance." They practiced their emergency plan several times. If they heard someone trying to break in, Sarah would immediately call 911 while Mike and Jake positioned themselves to defend the bedroom door. They also established code words they could use to communicate without alerting intruders to their plans. That evening, Mike called his brother Tom, who lived in another state. Tom was a military veteran who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mike explained their situation and asked for advice. "You're doing the right things," Tom said. "The key is to be prepared but not paranoid. Don't let them control your life with fear, but don't ignore the threat either." Tom also gave them some tactical advice. "If these guys are professionals, they'll probably try to come at night when they think you're sleeping. They might cut your power or phone lines first. Make sure you have battery-powered lights and a way to communicate that doesn't depend on your house's electrical system." Jake took notes during the phone conversation. He was absorbing everything like a sponge, treating this like a crash course in personal security. After the call, the family sat in their living room and talked about their situation. Sarah was still scared, but she was also getting angry. "I can't believe we're having to live like this," she said. "We've done everything right. We work hard, we pay our taxes, we don't bother anyone, and now we're basically under siege in our own home." Mike put his arm around his wife. "It's not going to last forever," he said. "Either the police will catch these people or they'll give up and move on to someone else." Jake was not so optimistic. "I don't think they're going to give up," he said. "They've put too much effort into this, and now they're angry because we fought back instead of just paying them." As if to prove Jake's point, the phone rang. Mike answered it, expecting another threatening call. But this time the caller's message was short and direct. "Tomorrow night," the voice said. "We're done playing games. Then the line went dead. The family looked at each other in silence. They all understood what that meant. The scammers were planning to escalate to actual violence. Tomorrow night, they would find out if all their preparations had been enough. Jake went to his room and opened the gun safe his father had installed that afternoon. Inside was the rifle he had chosen, along with ammunition and cleaning supplies. He had never thought he would actually need to use it, but tomorrow night that might change. He spent an hour cleaning and checking the weapon, making sure it was ready if needed. Then he sat at his desk and wrote a letter to his parents, explaining how proud he was of them for standing up to the scammers and not giving in to fear. He sealed the letter and put it in his desk drawer, hoping they would never need to read it. Tuesday morning started quietly. Sarah had decided not to go to work again, and Mike canceled his afternoon conference calls. They wanted to stay together as a family in case the scammers tried something during the day. Jake pretended to be sick so he could stay home from school without his parents asking too many questions. The family spent the morning reviewing their emergency plans and checking their security preparations. Mike tested all the motion sensor lights Jake had installed. Sarah made sure their phones were fully charged and that they had extra batteries for their flashlights. Jake cleaned his rifle one more time and made sure he knew exactly where the ammunition was stored. Around 10 o'clock, Mike was in his home office trying to catch up on some urgent work emails. The office was on the second floor at the front of the house, with windows that looked out over their driveway and front yard. He liked working there because he could see anyone who approached their house. Sarah was in the kitchen making lunch. Jake was in the living room, supposedly reading a book for English class, but actually positioned where he could watch both the front and back doors. Mike was concentrating on typing a response to a client when he heard the sound of a large engine accelerating rapidly outside. He looked up from his computer screen just in time to see a big pickup truck speeding up their driveway directly toward their garage. "Oh my God," Mike shouted, jumping up from his desk. The truck slammed into their garage door with tremendous force. The impact was so violent that it shook the entire house. Car alarms started going off in the neighborhood. Glass from the garage windows scattered across the driveway. Mike ran downstairs, his heart pounding. Sarah and Jake were already moving toward the front of the house to see what had happened. "Stay back," Mike yelled to his family. "Don't go outside." Through the living room window, they could see the pickup truck backing away from the damaged garage. The garage door was completely destroyed, hanging in twisted metal pieces. Their car inside the garage was damaged too, with broken glass and dents from falling debris. Two men got out of the pickup truck. Mike recognized them immediately. They were the same fake HOA enforcement officers who had come to their house on Saturday. The tall, thin one and the shorter, muscular one with tattoos. But this time they were not pretending to be official anymore. The shorter man was carrying a crowbar. The tall one had what looked like a baseball bat. They were walking toward the front door with obvious hostile intent. "Call 911 right now," Mike told Sarah. Sarah grabbed the phone and dialed while Mike and Jake watched the two men approach their house. "This is 911, what's your emergency?" the operator answered. "Two men just rammed our garage with a truck and now they're coming toward our house with weapons," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need police immediately at 1247 Elmwood Drive." Meanwhile, the two attackers had reached their front door and started pounding on it aggressively. "Open this door right now," the shorter man shouted. "We're done being nice about this." They could hear the crowbar hitting the door. The new locks Mike had installed were holding, but the door frame was starting to crack under the repeated impacts. "We know you're in there," the tall man yelled. "You should have just paid the money when we asked nicely." Mike looked at his wife and son. This was the moment they had been preparing for, but it was more frightening than he had imagined. "Upstairs," Mike said quietly. "Master bedroom, just like we planned." The family moved quickly up the stairs while the attackers continued trying to break down the front door. Sarah was still on the phone with the 911 operator, giving her updates about what was happening. "They're trying to break in the front door with a crowbar," she reported. "My husband and son are getting our protection ready." In the master bedroom, Mike and Jake took their planned positions near the door while Sarah stayed on the phone with Jake had retrieved his rifle from the gun safe and was loading it with hands that were surprisingly steady for a 16-year-old. The pounding on the front door stopped suddenly. For a moment, the house was quiet except for the sound of car alarms still going off outside. "Maybe they gave up," Sarah whispered hopefully. but Jake was looking out the bedroom window that faced the backyard. "No," he said grimly. "They're going around to the back door now." Sure enough, within seconds they could hear the back door being attacked with the same aggressive pounding and crowbar strikes. These men were determined to get inside the house, and they were not going to give up easily. "Where are the police?" Mike asked Sarah. Sarah relayed the question to the 911 operator. "They're en route," she reported back, "but it might be 5 or 10 minutes before they get here." The back door was newer and stronger than the front door, but it was also starting to give way under the repeated impacts. The attackers were shouting threats and obscenities now, making it clear that they intended to hurt the Johnson family when they got inside. "You made us do this," one of them yelled. "This is what happens when you don't cooperate." Jake checked his rifle one more time to make sure it was ready. He had positioned himself behind the bedroom dresser, which would give him cover and a clear shot at anyone who came through the bedroom door. Mike had the baseball bat he had bought at the hardware store. Sarah was still on the phone with 911, giving them a play-by-play of what was happening. Then they heard the sound they had been dreading, the back door finally giving way with a loud crash of splintering wood. "They're inside the house now." Sarah reported to the 911 operator. Heavy footsteps could be heard downstairs along with the voices of the two intruders. "Search every room," one of them commanded. "Find them and make them pay." The footsteps started coming up the stairs. Mike positioned himself next to the bedroom door, ready to defend his family. Jake aimed his rifle at the door, his finger on the trigger safety. Sarah continued whispering updates to the 911 operator. "They're coming upstairs now. My family is ready to defend ourselves." The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and started moving down the hallway toward their bedroom. Jake could see the shadows of feet moving under the door. "We know you're in there," the shorter man called out. "Come out now and maybe we'll go easy on you." The bedroom door handle turned slowly. Mike raised his baseball bat. Jake clicked off the safety on his rifle and took careful aim at the center of the door. "This is your last chance," the tall man shouted from the hallway. The door handle turned completely and the door started to open. But as the first intruder began to push into the room, they all heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Police sirens getting louder and louder as they approached the house. The door stopped opening. The footsteps in the hallway paused. "Cops!" one of the attackers hissed to the other. There was a moment of confusion and panic among the intruders. Then the footsteps started running back toward the stairs. "They're running," Sarah reported to the 911 operator. Mike looked out the bedroom window and saw police cars pulling into their driveway with lights flashing. The two attackers ran out the back door and toward their pickup truck, but it was too late. Police officers were already surrounding the vehicle. The Johnson family stayed in their defensive positions until they heard Officer Martinez calling their names from downstairs. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson." "This is Officer Martinez. The suspects are in custody. You can come down now." Only then did Jake put the safety back on his rifle and set it aside. His hands were shaking now, but during the attack they had been rock steady. Mike put down his baseball bat and hugged his wife. "It's over," he said. "We're safe." But as they went downstairs to talk to the police, Jake realized that while this particular threat was over, the experience had changed him forever. He had been ready to defend his family with lethal force if necessary, and he would do it again if he had to. The moment Jake heard the truck slam into their garage, something changed inside him. While his parents were still trying to process what was happening, Jake was already moving with a clarity of purpose that surprised even himself. As his father shouted for everyone to get upstairs, Jake made a split-second decision. Instead of following his parents immediately, he ran to his bedroom and opened the gun safe. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he pulled out his rifle and the tactical vest he had purchased but never told his parents about. Jake had been preparing for this moment more thoroughly than his family realized. Over the past week, while pretending to go to school, he had actually been spending time at the shooting range with Bill, the retired police officer from the gun store. Bill had taught him not just how to shoot accurately, but how to move and position himself tactically. "If you're ever in a real situation," Bill had told him, "you need to think like a soldier, not like a scared kid. Stay calm, move with purpose, and be ready to do whatever is necessary to protect your family." Now, as Jake strapped on his tactical vest and loaded his rifle, those lessons came flooding back. He could hear the attackers pounding on the front door downstairs, shouting threats and trying to break in with their crowbar. But instead of fear, Jake felt a cold, focused determination. He knew his parents expected him to join them in the master bedroom according to their plan. But Jake had realized something his parents had not considered. If the attackers broke in and cornered them in the bedroom, his family would be trapped with no way to escape. Someone needed to be in a position to stop the intruders before they could reach his parents. Jake moved quietly to the top of the stairs, positioning himself where he could see both the front and back entrances to the house. He was wearing dark clothes and his tactical vest, with his rifle held in a low ready position. If someone looked up from downstairs, they might not see him in the shadows of the upper hallway. When the pounding on the front door stopped, Jake moved to a window where he could watch the attackers circle around to the back of the house. He saw them clearly now, the same two men who had threatened his father on Saturday, but now they were openly violent and obviously beyond any pretense of being legitimate officials. The shorter man with tattoos was swinging the crowbar at their back door like he was trying to demolish it completely. The tall, thin one was standing watch with his baseball bat, making sure no neighbors interfered. Both men were shouting threats about what they were going to do to the Johnson family once they got inside. Jake positioned himself at the top of the stairs where he would have a clear field of fire on anyone coming up to the second floor. He could hear his parents in the master bedroom, his mother still on the phone with 911, his father getting ready with the baseball bat. They were following their defensive plan, but they were also essentially trapped in that room. When the back door finally gave way with a crash of splintering wood, Jake felt his heartbeat slow down instead of speed up. This was something else Bill had taught him. In a real crisis, your body would either flood you with adrenaline that made you panic, or it would shift into a state of focused calm that allowed you to function at peak efficiency. Jake was experiencing the second option. His vision seemed sharper, his hearing more acute, his movements more precise. He could track exactly where the intruders were in the house just by listening to their footsteps and voices. "Tear this place apart," one of them shouted. "Find them and make them sorry they ever messed with us." Jake heard them moving through the downstairs rooms, obviously searching for his family. They were being loud and destructive, breaking things and overturning furniture. But they were also being methodical, checking each room thoroughly before moving on to the next. It would not take them long to realize that the family must be upstairs. Sure enough, after a few minutes, Jake heard one of them say, "They're not down here. Must be hiding upstairs." The footsteps started moving toward the staircase. Jake adjusted his position slightly and clicked off the safety on his rifle. He was aiming at the point where anyone coming up the stairs would first become visible, but then something unexpected happened. Instead of both men coming upstairs together, Jake heard them splitting up. "You take the stairs," the shorter man said to his partner. "I'll check the garage and make sure they didn't sneak out that way." This was actually better for Jake's purposes. Instead of having to deal with two armed attackers at once, he would face them one at a time. The tall, thin man started climbing the stairs slowly, his baseball bat raised and ready. Jake could see the top of his head first, then his shoulders as he ascended step by step. "I know you're up there," the man called out. "Come out now and we'll make this quick." When the intruder was about halfway up the stairs, Jake made his move. But instead of shooting, he did something that completely surprised the attacker. Jake stood up from his concealed position and stepped into full view at the top of the stairs. He was wearing his tactical vest and helmet and holding his rifle in a proper combat stance. To the intruder, he must have looked like a fully equipped soldier rather than a 16-year-old boy. "Stop right there," Jake said in a calm, clear voice. "Put down your weapon and get out of my house." The intruder froze on the stairs, staring up at Jake in complete shock. Whatever he had been expecting to find, it was not a tactically equipped teenager pointing a rifle at his chest. "What the hell?" the man started to say. "I said stop," Jake repeated, moving his rifle slightly to center it on the intruder's torso. "Drop the bat and back down the stairs slowly." The intruder looked at Jake's tactical gear and the steady way he held his weapon. Even from a distance, it was obvious that Jake knew what he was doing. This was not some kid playing with his father's hunting rifle. This was someone who had been trained and was prepared to use deadly force if necessary. "Kid, you don't want to do this," the intruder said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had carried before. "Actually, I do want to do this," Jake replied. "You broke into my house and threatened my family. In this state, that gives me the legal right to use whatever force is necessary to stop you." The man started to raise his baseball bat, but Jake shifted his aim slightly higher toward the man's head. "Don't," Jake said simply. The intruder looked into Jake's eyes and saw something that made him reconsider. This teenager was not bluffing, and he was not afraid. If the intruder made any aggressive move, Jake would pull the trigger without hesitation. That was when they all heard the police sirens approaching the house. "Your partner is probably already running," Jake told the intruder. "If you're smart, you'll do the same thing. But you have about 30 seconds before this place is surrounded by cops." The tall man looked at Jake one more time, then threw down his baseball bat and ran back down the stairs. Jake maintained his position until he heard both intruders fleeing through the back door and saw police cars pulling into the driveway. Only then did Jake put his weapon on safe and call out to his parents. "Mom, Dad, the police are here. It's over." When Officer Martinez came upstairs and saw Jake in his tactical gear, his expression was one of complete amazement. "Son," he said, "how old are you?" 16, Jake replied. Officer Martinez shook his head in disbelief. "Well, you just handled that situation better than most trained police officers would have. Where did you learn to do that?" Jake thought about Bill's training, about all the military history books he had read, about the hours he had spent preparing for this exact scenario. "I learned from someone who knows what he's talking about," Jake said, "and I learned that sometimes you have to be ready to protect the people you love, no matter how old you are." Later, when the police were interviewing the family about what had happened, Officer Martinez made a point of commending Jake's actions. "That young man probably saved his family's lives today," he told Mike and Sarah. His tactical response was textbook perfect. He controlled the situation, de-escalated when possible, and was ready to use appropriate force if necessary. "You should be very proud of him." Mike and Sarah looked at their son with a mixture of pride and amazement. They realized that while they had been focused on basic home security, Jake had been preparing for warfare. And when the moment came, he had been ready. The two attackers did not get very far. Officer Martinez and 3 other police cars had surrounded the house before the intruders could escape in their damaged pickup truck. The shorter man with tattoos tried to run across the neighbor's backyard, but was tackled by Officer Johnson near the fence. The tall, thin man surrendered immediately when he saw police officers pointing guns at him. Both men were arrested and charged with multiple serious crimes: breaking and entering, assault with deadly weapons, stalking, fraud, and extortion. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Security camera footage from Jake's bedroom window, recordings of their threatening phone calls, the damaged garage door, and testimony from multiple witnesses. During questioning at the police station, the two men quickly gave up information about the larger operation they were part of. It turned out they were not independent scammers, but part of an organized criminal network that had been running fake HOA scams across 3 different states. The operation was more sophisticated than anyone had realized. They had a central office where they researched potential victims, created fake legal documents, and coordinated harassment campaigns. They specifically targeted middle-class families in neighborhoods without real HOAs, because those families would be less likely to know immediately that the demands were fake. Detective Williams, who specialized in fraud cases, explained the scope of the operation to the Johnson family when they came to the station the next day to give detailed statements. "Your case broke this whole thing open," Detective Williams told them. "These people have been scamming families for over 2 years. They've collected hundreds of thousands of dollars from victims who were too scared or confused to fight back. The fake HOA letters and phone calls were just the beginning. If families refused to pay, the scammers would escalate to property damage and home invasions designed to terrorize victims into compliance. Several families in other states had been burglarized or had their cars vandalized after refusing to pay the fake HOA fees. The difference in your case," Detective Williams said, "is that you fought back instead of just hoping they would go away. And your son's response completely surprised them. They expected to find scared victims, not a tactically trained teenager ready for combat." Jake's actions during the home invasion had been recorded by the security cameras Mike had installed. The footage showed Jake moving with military precision, taking proper defensive positions, and maintaining complete control of the situation even when facing armed intruders. The video had already been shared among local law enforcement as an example of excellent home defense tactics. Several police officers had asked to meet Jake personally to complement his performance under pressure. Bill, the retired police officer from the gun store, was especially proud when he saw the security footage. "That kid did everything exactly right," Bill told Mike and Sarah. "He stayed calm, used appropriate force, gave the intruders a chance to surrender, and was prepared to protect his family if necessary. You can't teach that kind of courage, but you can teach the skills to make it effective." The criminal investigation revealed that the Johnson family had been targeted because of their property value and location. The scammers had researched their neighborhood and identified families who appeared to have enough money to pay substantial fake fees but not enough wealth to have professional security systems or legal representation. They had been watching the Johnson house for weeks before sending the first fake letter. The white van Jake had been photographing contained surveillance equipment and cameras. The scammers knew the family's daily routines, work schedules, and personal habits because they had been conducting detailed reconnaissance. "This was not a random crime," Detective Williams explained. "These people invested significant time and resources in targeting your family specifically. When you refused to pay and fought back, they felt like they had to follow through on their threats or their whole operation would look weak." The arrests led to search warrants for the scammers' main office and several storage facilities where they kept fake documents and equipment. Police found thousands of counterfeit HOA letters, fake legal documents, and detailed files on hundreds of potential victims across multiple states. The investigation also revealed that the two men who had attacked the Johnson house were not the leaders of the operation, just low-level enforcers. The real masterminds were a husband and wife team who ran the scam from an office building in another city. They were arrested 2 days later and faced federal charges for running a criminal enterprise across state lines. Mike and Sarah had to take time off work to deal with insurance claims for the damage to their garage and car. The repairs took several weeks and cost thousands of dollars, but their insurance company covered most of the expenses after seeing the police reports, proving they were victims of a crime. The story of Jake's tactical response to the home invasion quickly spread beyond law enforcement circles. A local news reporter heard about it from a police contact and asked to interview the family. The story was picked up by regional and then national news outlets, making Jake briefly famous as the tactical teenager who defended his family from fake HOA scammers. Jake was not entirely comfortable with the media attention. He gave a few interviews but mostly tried to stay out of the spotlight. He was more interested in getting back to normal life than in being famous for something he considered just doing what was necessary to protect his family. The media coverage did have one positive effect. It warned other families about HOA scams and led to dozens of tips that helped police identify additional victims and suspects in other states. Several families came forward to report similar harassment they had been experiencing, allowing police to prevent other potential home invasions. At school, Jake became something of a celebrity among his classmates, but he was modest about his actions and focused more on encouraging other students to learn about home security and personal protection. "Anyone can learn these skills," Jake told a reporter from the school newspaper. "The important thing is being prepared before you need to be. When something bad happens, it's too late to start learning how to handle it." Mike and Sarah were amazed at how mature their son had become through this experience. The quiet teenager who used to keep to himself had evolved into a confident young man who took responsibility for protecting his family seriously. "I always knew Jake was smart," Sarah told her sister during a phone call, "but I never knew he was capable of staying so calm and focused under that kind of pressure. He probably saved our lives." The criminal trial took place 6 months later. All 4 members of the main criminal organization pleaded guilty to federal charges and were sentenced to substantial prison terms. The 2 men who had attacked the Johnson house each received 8 years in federal prison. The husband and wife who ran the operation received 15 years each. During the sentencing hearing, the federal judge praised the Johnson family for their courage in fighting back against the scammers. This family's refusal to be victimized not only protected them, but led to the dismantling of a criminal operation that had terrorized dozens of families across multiple states, the judge said. Their actions, particularly those of young Mr. Johnson, demonstrate that ordinary citizens can effectively defend themselves when they are properly prepared and have the courage to act. Jake, now 17, was in the courtroom for the sentencing. He had grown taller over the past year and carried himself with quiet confidence. When reporters asked him how he felt about the prison sentences, his response was thoughtful and mature. "I'm glad these people can't hurt any more families," he said. "But I hope other people learn from what happened to us. Don't assume that bad things only happen to other people. Be prepared to protect yourself and the people you love." The Johnson family eventually moved to a new house in a different neighborhood, not because they were afraid, but because they wanted a fresh start without the memories of that traumatic day. Their new house had better security from the beginning, and Jake made sure the family maintained their emergency preparedness. Jake went on to join his high school's ROTC program and planned to study criminal justice in college. He wanted to become a police officer or federal agent, inspired by the law enforcement officers who had helped his family during their crisis. Mike and Sarah remained grateful for their son's actions, but they also recognized that the experience had changed their family forever. They had learned that ordinary people could face extraordinary threats, and that being prepared to defend yourself was not paranoia, but simple prudence. "We always thought we lived in a safe neighborhood where nothing bad could happen," Sarah reflected a year later. "We learned that safety is not about where you live, but about being ready to handle whatever comes your way." The fake HOA scam had been designed to make victims feel helpless and isolated, but the Johnson family had refused to be victims. By standing together, preparing carefully, and being willing to defend themselves, they had not only protected their own family, but helped bring down an entire criminal organization. And Jake had learned that sometimes, even at 16 years old, you have to be ready to do whatever it takes to protect the people you love most.